alien invasion. Is it biblical? Of course it is.
Clearly, I'm not here today as a fact witness.
You can Google it.
I think you just use the Bible to do whatever the hell you like.
Just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
Welcome to Mystery Bible Theater 3000. My name is Caleb Hagan. With me, of course, my lovely assistant, Rob Vanhoff. What is up, my guy? How you doing?
Doing very well, thank you very much. Looking forward to whatever's on our plate today.
Yes, I'll tell you what. I've been doing
here at Mystery Bible Theater 3000.
Right. I've been doing some memory work.
Learned
How to do verbatim memory work. Got a method I'm using. I've learned 6 verses in about 2 days. I was thinking about actually sharing it with people on pronomian.com. I don't know if that fits the content mold.
As an encouragement to people, maybe.
It is encouraging to be able to memorize stuff. Okay, here we go. To chegg at torahresource.com, chegg at torahresource.com. Send your videos there. Try to keep them under 5 minutes. Like this one. This one was about 5 minutes and 30 seconds. We're going to not watch the whole thing, but that's okay. And what else do we got? 253-465-3205. That's our comment line. You want to talk to us. And then, of course, subscribe. Gotta do that. Subscribe. Like this video. It helps us. I know that sounds weird, but it does help us. Okay. Today, this will be controversial, of course. Why? Because anytime you talk about the views of the revered evangelical preachers, you are going to get pushback. And this one has a cult following, as many do. Now, don't get me wrong. Okay, I just put the hand down and show you the cards right now. We're looking at something that Johnny Mac says. Now, John MacArthur is. I like listening to John. Mr. MacArthur, Dr. MacArthur. I think that he is a great preacher. Now, I know a lot of people disagree with that. I know a lot of people really don't like his content. I, however, am not one of those people. I like what John MacArthur has to say. I think his commentary. Now, I doubt that Dr. MacArthur would ever listen to anything that we would do. However, if he ever stumbled upon this video, I'm going to be harsh for a few seconds. His preaching, I think, is dynamite, and I think that there's a reason that he has such a large congregation, a large following, and I think that the Lord has used him in many ways. If you listen to some of his older stuff, even into the stuff that he's putting out today, he really does have an incredible gift of preaching. I believe that, and even if you disagree with that, I would point to the numbers. The fact that he has such a following proves that he's grabbing the attention of many people. With that said, I think that his biblical commentaries are very underwhelming. I think that he has. I don't know exactly. Well, I do know. The reason that I'm not fond of his commentaries is simply because I don't think he did due diligence on a lot of heavy issues. When I was going through Acts, I used his commentary, and it was very, very surface level. It felt like he didn't really look at any of the other ideas out there except for his own. And because of that, I think he made some grave mistakes in his commentary. With all that said, I think that this is going to be one of those grave mistakes that he has made. And of course, this is one of the ones that so many people have an issue with, which is the kosher laws for Christians, right? Should Christians be keeping the kosher laws? I think that is actually the name of this video. Now, I'm going to set this video up a little differently. MacArthur does a lot of Q&As, and this is during one of those Q&As. Somebody comes up and asks him and says, hey, look, we've been talking about fellowship meals, we've been talking about all that kind of stuff. What about Leviticus 11? In Leviticus 11, God gives us all these clean and unclean animals. Seems like this ties into table fellowship. What do we do with these today?
Yeah, I like how he says they're not part of our cuisine today. So the guy has this idea of, cuisine, like, in other words, I eat whatever I want. When I go to a restaurant, I go whatever I want. I eat whatever I want. And he's like saying, wow, we we Christians eat whatever we want. And a lot of the things that if you look in detail, they go against Leviticus 11. What gives?
Okay, so before we even jump into this, I think that many people know that food and meals have really kind of captivated my attention, and so one of the things that I've noticed,
food and meals have always captivated your attention, Caleb.
That's right. You
can put down a burger. Let me just say,
no doubt. Okay. That's for sure. And Rob would know. He had to spend a week with me in San Antonio in November. So the fact is, when we talk about the kosher laws, everybody points to Leviticus 11. Now, this isn't a bad thing. Obviously, this is part of the scriptures, and this is the place where the kosher laws are really hashed out in detail. With that said, this is not the only place that we have the kosher laws. And the reason that I point this out, and my friend Jeff is the one who initially pointed this out to me, and I have really kind of tried to think about this a lot. But when we look at Leviticus 11, scholars are going to tell you that the Holiness Code starts in Leviticus 17 to the end of the chapter, right? So the Holiness Code being that these are kind of the laws for everyone in Israel, not just for the priests and for the like they're going to say ceremonial aspects of the law.
It's the be holy because I am holy kind
That's
of
exactly right.
Context.
Exactly. And so be holy for I am holy, and therefore now we are looking at all Israel. And what many people will say look, the kosher laws are put in Leviticus 11. This actually applies to ceremonial aspects of the law. Now, anyone who's watched this show enough knows that Rob and I disagree with the idea of chopping the Torah into civil, ceremonial, and moral as a hard and fast rule. You can't do that. There are some now. Certainly, we can categorize in some ways. We would be able to say, well, this may be more ceremonial, this may be more, but all of God's laws are moral. That's number one. Number two, we've shown in multiple different places where laws cross over into all three categories, two categories, whatever. So the categories are, I would say, first of all, they're man-made categories, which is fine. I don't have a problem with man-made categories. However, my point is simply that these categories, they have to be flexible because there are plenty of laws that cross over. And the kosher laws is one of these things that I would argue crosses over. The reason why is because within Deuteronomy, you don't have any priestly duties within Deuteronomy, right? There's no laws about the priest doing this or the priest doing that or, in the tabernacle or anything like that. What you do have, however, is the kosher laws. The kosher laws, the law of Deuteronomy is for the average person within their towns, within their cities, to keep the laws so that they can be holy like God is holy. And Deuteronomy contains these kosher laws that a person is to maintain in their city, in their home, and it doesn't have to do with the temple. It is not attached to the temple or to the priesthood or anything like that. These laws are for the average person, which means that they are not ceremonial if you're going to use those categories. They are moral laws. And I think that this is something that is not talked about enough
right.
within this.
Well, another aspect too, 2 points. One is kosher is a shorthand, and I think it's helpful, but just a reminder to listeners out there, kosher is a term we're using. It's not actually in the text of Leviticus 11 or Deuteronomy 14. But secondly is just for those who are really stuck on, they really believe there is a ceremonial category. You could just ask yourself, is God pleased with someone who does something ceremonially? In other words, if it's just an outer thing. Well, if someone does this ceremonial thing, is it acceptable as worship to God? No. And I would say no, because we know that from Isaiah chapter 1, they were offering burnt offerings, right?
Right.
And you could say, that's ceremonial. Well, God said it stunk. He didn't want to have anything to do with that. Why? Because their hands were covered with blood. Because it wasn't informed that the behavior of the worship, it wasn't the wrong animals, it wasn't the wrong blessings, it wasn't the wrong slaughter, it wasn't the wrong location, it was the wrong heart.
Right.
And so if you just say ceremonial, it's almost like, there was a place where God accepted a kind of behavior that really didn't have to do with the heart of the worshiper. It's just like external, and that God would be pleased with that. And there's no scenario where God is pleased with hypocrisy or lip service. So, or outer show.
Well,
so anyway,
like even the thing that you're talking about. Okay, well, if the ceremonial aspects of the law are done away with, and only the moral laws are to stand, what about cult prostitution?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody will say, well, it's a moral issue not to cheat on your wife. Okay, but if cult prostitution really doesn't have to do with whether or not I like the person or not, it really just has to do with a form of worship, and it's ceremonial. This is a ceremonial law.
Well, what about putting food at
the feet of
at
Baal,
an idol, or whatever?
Yeah,
it's just ceremonial.
It doesn't work like that. Anyway, okay, so all of this to kind of set up for us what Dr. MacArthur is going to now say. So as we've already said, this gentleman comes up, he asks this question, the food laws, the many of the foods that are mentioned in Leviticus 11 are now part of the American cuisine. What do we do with this? And here is Dr. MacArthur's response. Let's get over here. Here's his response.
The critical thing for God dealing with Israel was this. They were to be the repository, the national repository of divine truth, okay? They were the sole monotheists in a polytheistic, animistic world, okay? They were the true worshipers of the true God. They were an island in a sea of polytheism, animism, whatever kind of false religion, multiple gods. How was God going to protect them and insulate them? The food and fellowship thing comes into play. They couldn't dress like the other nations. They couldn't eat like the other nations. And basically all social contact, as it still does, is built around the dining environment. And so what God was doing was isolating them. They had.
I want to stop for just 1 second. Now, here's the thing that confuses me about what Dr. MacArthur has just said. I mean, I agree that the law is given to Israel to separate them, right? To separate them out from the world. However, Christ tells us that we are to be in the world, but not of the world, right? The apostolic scriptures, the New Testament, continues to tell us that we are not to be like the people around us, right? That we are to be holy, that we're supposed to be different. So what's the difference? MacArthur's saying here, well, Israel was supposed to be this thing that was separate, and it seems like he's going to the place that's going to be like, well, but that's no more. Certainly, the culture around us, and Dr. MacArthur has fought this tooth and nail himself, right? During COVID and whatnot, he was the beacon of light that stood up and said, "No, we're people are going to come to church. We're going to worship no matter what the government says," right? And yet now it seems like he's saying, well, we don't have to do that anymore because now we're in a culture where everybody believes? No, there's tons of false religions around us. We still are
agreed.
We're still the beacon of light to the nations around us, that we are different.
A key word he uses here is God wants to isolate. He uses the word isolate his people from the paganism around them. And then what he's going to argue is that after Christ came, there's that isolation period is over, right? But that's the wrong frame. Right. That there is it's sanctification unto God. That's why, and it's not that they can't dress like other. There's no one says don't dress like them. It just says there's just specific instructions pertaining to dress, but there's all manner of ways that dress could be biblically implemented, right? It's not like,
you have to wear a toga.
Yeah. There's nothing like that. And so So that's strange. But sadly, I think it's a sad thing that he's stressing Israel, that God needed to isolate Israel, rather than just read what the Torah says, which is, it's not about isolation, it's about sanctification.
Right.
Unto him. He says, you be holy because I'm holy. It's not be different from them because I need to isolate you from them. That's not the message. The message is be holy unto me because I am holy. And then subsequent, that means these other nations are in darkness and ignorance. They don't know what they worship. They worship demons. So don't follow after their liturgies and their religious views and their ways of looking at the world. Don't be like them. But that's not an end of itself. The isolation of Israel makes it seem like that's the goal, and that's not the goal. The goal is sanctification of God's people unto himself, for he is holy. The logic comes from God as holy.
Let's be fair to John MacArthur here. MacArthur has been a strong force when it comes to advocating for the conservative values of the Christian church. And I think that needs to be noted. This is one of the reasons that it's so confusing when MacArthur tries to do away with the sanctification that God has set up. Certainly, MacArthur has been a force when he talks. He's not going to budge on things like LGBTQ plus stuff. His story about when he accidentally baptized a trans woman and then confronted him on it is I think well known among many evangelicals, and it still stands today. The point simply is this: MacArthur is no stranger to the idea that the church and the Christians within it must be sanctified unto God. He preaches it from that exact pulpit that he's standing in front behind right now.
But he needs Israel to be something different.
Exactly.
He needs it. He needs to be. Oh, that was back then, to a certain degree.
Yep. Let's keep going.
Cooking laws. They had certain animals they could not eat. There were ways they had to prepare the food. They couldn't mix milk and meat. That's still part of being kosher today.
This is such a statement. Hang on. Such a statement is exactly the kind of thing that he slips into his commentaries, which is just asinine. In other words, this is not due diligence. The Torah never says that you have to separate milk and meat, and the Jewish rabbinics that surround it are ridiculous in and of themselves.
That hurt to hear him say that. Seriously, man, that hurt. That sucks.
Yep.
That sucks because people who are trusting him are just going to take that for granted as
right.
like, oh, and our mandate from Yeshua is we are to be clear on differentiating the word of God from traditions of men. I mean, that we can't blend those together and pretend, that this is helping us.
Let's pretend that MacArthur's assertion that the Torah in some way tells us to separate milk and meat, which by the way didn't come around until much later after Christ was on this earth.
Yeah, it's almost like he's saying that the oral law is God's will. Right. And that it's done away. It's the oral law that's done away, not the written law.
Let's pretend for a few seconds that the Torah actually did say that. What would we do then? Well, we would separate milk and meat if that was the case.
Exactly.
We wouldn't say, well, that's just stupid. We're not going to do it.
But here's the thing. It seems like he adds it because people will go, oh, obviously.
Exactly.
You know, they're
exactly.
Like, yeah, that's silly. So it's a dismissive of the revealed will of God. That's scary. That's why it hurt to hear him say. I'm shocked.
The reason this is so egregious to me is because it seems like a tactic. MacArthur should know better that this is not in the Torah, first of all. Second of all, he should know better that it wasn't even in place when Yeshua was on earth. And he should know that it comes much later in the rabbinic writings.
I would say there's how many thousand people there listening to this?
Yeah, it's not just a misstep. It seems such a comment seems like he's steering people in a certain way.
It's cheap.
It's a cheap.
I have to believe that there are a small percentage, at least, of the people in attendance there when this was live that they knew that was
I'll tell you what, for the sake of brotherly love, let's assume that somehow John MacArthur's extreme biblical knowledge and his insight into the word fell short here, and he really does, for some reason, think that the Bible taught that you had to separate milk and meat. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't know how this could be such a thing, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he believes for now that statement is actually true. Let's keep going.
But all of that had no real purpose other than isolation.
There it is again.
Oh, it had no real purpose except for isolation. This is a false
again
statement
and again
as well.
and again. Be holy, for I am holy. What does he tell the priests? So that you will teach the children of Israel the difference between the holy and the profane, the clean and the unclean.
For
right?
I am holy, so that you will teach them that I am holy. Oh man, it's hard because once again, this is such a strong misstep. It almost feels misleading. Now, I genuinely don't think that MacArthur's trying to mislead here. What I think is happening is that MacArthur, like so many other Christians, has taken a false pretense, and now they're trying to cram it into the Bible. And so what they're going to do is they're going to use as much as they're going to throw as much spaghetti at the wall as possible and just hope that some of it sticks so that their argument sounds coherent. He's fully bought in on this, by the way. MacArthur's not sitting at home thinking to himself, I wonder if I shouldn't be eating bacon tomorrow morning. He is fully bought in on this. But the problem is that the weakness of his argument shows in the things that he is bringing up. The laws were only for isolation? No. The laws of God are for sanctification. Pure and simple. God tells us that in the text. Let's keep going.
Just a way to separate them. That this was part of their cleanliness, so that they...
Let's stop one more time. I'm sorry. Just a way to separate them. Okay. What is sanctification?
It is separation, but it's like there's a twist here. Yeah. That it's like, yeah, it was only to isolate them. That, like, he's almost taking sanctification and making it seem like it was just an isolation. Yes, it functioned to that Israel is going to look different. They're going to eat different. Yes, that's true. But the story that a Jew would tell a Gentile is not, I'm just different than you because of my God. It would be, let me tell you about the God of Israel and what holiness is. Right? It's two different messages.
Yeah.
Now, It's true that the rabbinic movement did become this isolationist, right? There are parts of the Jewish world and sectarianism that did run with an isolationist kind of interpretation.
Okay, I agree. Well, hang on. Let's just put this back on MacArthur. Would MacArthur say that today, when a Christian is sanctified, they are isolated from the world? Of course not.
No, that's why Yeshua says you light the lamp and you put it up high. You don't put it under a barrel or under.
But the point is that even MacArthur himself does not agree with what he's saying. He does not believe that sanctification is an isolation tool from God. Which
is weird, and I hear what you're saying. It's almost like I do value the fact that he will do these big Q&As. I think that's awesome. I think it's necessary in the church to have this kind of thing. But it sounds like from the get-go, how many times? Oh, they were in the midst of pagans. They were in the midst of.
But aren't we even more so? We got men chopping off parts of their bodies right now to try to be women all around us. You think that this is any better than the ancient world? Come on.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, the whole dressing thing is definitely Torah, right? And the cross-dressing was going off. Drag was a thing.
The point is that the main point here is that it seems to me like MacArthur, in his attempt to try to justify his own misinterpretation, What he is doing is he is trying to talk out of two sides of his mouth. At one point, he's going to say, we as the church have to stand as a beacon of light. We have to be separate from the world, yet in the world, and we need to go out and make disciples for Christ, but we need to be sanctified unto God. So that's one side of the mouth. The other side is, the ancient Israel, their sanctification was not for anything except for isolation. They just needed to be isolated and cut off from the world. And so that's done away with. This is ridiculous. So I just want to paint the picture here. If this is what MacArthur is saying, and maybe it's not, but if this is what, it sure sounds like what he's saying. If this is what MacArthur is saying, then sanctification changes once Christ comes.
Exactly. That's I'm hearing the same thing, Caleb. If we follow his line of thought, we must, because the word lekadesh, right, in Hebrew, and words like kadosh and kedoshim, the same words that Paul says you're saints, right? Be holy. In the Epistle of Peter, be holy, for I'm holy. It cites the Torah on this. But we would have to say that there is a shift in meaning of that word. And I refuse to go. You're right. That's a non-negotiable. There's no way. I'm not budging on. It means the same thing. Both sides of the cross.
Maybe people don't understand why that's such an egregious shift for us. However,
because God doesn't change for one.
Exactly, because the sanctification that we find in God's law is a reflection of God's holiness.
Exactly, it's His character. It's right. Exactly.
And so for MacArthur to say that sanctification has changed.
And remember, we we responded to people few weeks back in one of our mystery Bible theaters where they were talking about, the laws were always divine laws ultimately, or universally applied principles and stuff like that. It's like so whack compared to this. But yeah, it's not man's inventions. Right. We're not talking about anything, even like, the Bill of Rights or anything where men get together and they're really smart men and they're wise and they put together these things. Those are still man-made. This, if he's suggesting that the Torah is not a reflection of the will of God, reflecting God's holy, righteous, just, loving, etc., merciful character, then yeah, it's troubling. I'm shocked. So I'm thankful whoever shared this video with us to hear this.
Let's listen to 20 more seconds, and then we'll call it a day.
They just couldn't go over to anybody's place and interact with them and therefore be influenced. God was designing a peculiar people. Another way to view it on the big picture side was, no matter how the other nations did it, the Jews did it different. No matter how they dressed, the Jews dressed differently. No matter what they ate, the Jews ate differently. No matter how they prepared the food, the Jews did it differently. They had all kinds of laws with regard to Sabbath, ceremony, worship, all that isolated them. The design of God was to isolate the community for its own holiness, separation. At the same time, they were challenged to proclaim the truth.
Just like today.
But with an inability to interact with the other cultures to protect them from evil influence. And God was protecting.
Hang on just a sec. With an inability to interact with other cultures, I would simply point out that throughout Israel's history, all the way back, right, they are interacting with other cultures. Constantly they're interacting with other cultures. God is telling them to go interact with other cultures. So this is I think that this is a little of an odd take. I understand why he's taking this, but I just think it's a misstep.
The people to protect their future so that the Messiah would come from Abraham through the line of David, that would still be in existence. So that was.
Hang on just a second.
Okay, I almost need you to rewind. Go ahead, unless you're going to interpret that for me.
Yeah,
Help me
I
out.
would love
Help
to
me.
interpret this, because I think what MacArthur's trying to say is that God gives them this law so that the line of Israel will be maintained, so that the Messiah can come from the line of David. In other words, the Messiah had to come from this line of people that was peculiar and sanctified unto God, and to do that, he isolates them so that the Messiah comes from that line. The thing that he is missing is that, and MacArthur knows this for sure. As soon as even. What is it?
Dude,
Deuteronomy 30.
Right after Joshua dies, dude.
Before that.
The whole Tanakh is the prophets are railing against Israel's idolatry.
What happens? Hang on. Wait. God takes Moses up on the mountain and he shows him all the land, right? And he says, look, as soon as you die, guess what's going to happen? These people are going to follow after the false gods. They're going to turn from me. They're going to reject me as soon as you die. And then he puts Josh in charge, right? He's like, Josh, now you're in charge. And hey, Mo, sorry, you're out. Mo dies up on the mountain. Josh brings them into the land. And what happens? Instantaneously, they follow after other gods. This did not protect them.
So MacArthur's saying, look, God gave these laws to isolate Israel from the nations. It failed.
It didn't work.
It didn't work. Right. But he did it in order to preserve the line for the Messiah. But it didn't work. But the Messiah still came. I don't know how to connect these dots. From
David, who also fell, right? He's
Babylonian captivity, I mean,
exactly.
This is
exactly. Think about this. After he brings them into the land, they're so protected, they're so isolated that they preserve this line. No, God takes them out of the land. Not once. Come on. He destroys the temple. They are constantly being shifted around, right? Egypt, comes in and conquers and takes certain people away, including prophets. Babylon comes in and the Babylonian captivity happens, right? Israel is essentially scattered around into the other nations. What is MacArthur trying to say here? This is laziness on MacArthur's part. Now, once again, I don't want to be too harsh on a man of God who has been able to bring so many people to Christ. But this right here, this particular teaching is lazy. It's not only lazy, but it's false. And MacArthur should do better. He knows better. He is a better teacher and scholar than this. He should do better. This is egregious.
James says the teachers have a higher accountability, a stricter judgment.
Yeah, this one he has fallen short on.
As much as it hurts, I'm glad to know about this because it's shocking. Like I said, it's shocking. It shows that we can all have either planks or specks in our eyes. I don't doubt his faith. Hearing him teach this there's a grief, because honestly, he's speaking. There's 1,000, how many other churches that are going to basically paint the same picture for people who are having this kind of question. And it seemed to me that, like, if you go and watch the video and hear the sincerity, it sounds like a real humble guy. He's almost trembling because he's like, he has so much respect for Dr. MacArthur, and so he asks the question in a very concise, clear. It's beautifully phrased question, and I hope this believer continued to ask this question and get other.
Look, let's just be honest here too. MacArthur is just regurgitating what his teachers have taught him. This is not well thought out by MacArthur. He's just toting the Christian tradition line.
This is an example of putting the traditions of man above, making null the word of God. Right. This is an example. This is no different than the Pharisees talking about hand washing in like Matthew 15.
Yep.
We've just changed some of the details, but the structural implication is the same. And to any suggestion that the God of Israel is pleased with lip service or something that's external or something that is really not pertaining to his character, but he just wants to, implement this particular commandment because it's just going to make them different or, isolate Israel. That's not, we need to remember that the core covenant promise with Abraham, in your seed, all the nations of the world will be blessed. That's what Yeshua says when he says, you don't light a lamp and hide it. You light a lamp and you put it up. And all he's saying is Yeshua's addressing that same thing. With your traditions, you are taking what God has given you and you're turning it into this isolationist, we're special isolationist kind of interpretive frame. And it's wrong. It needs to, the idea of holiness unto God is so that the nations of the world see you and they glorify your Father in heaven, that they see that it's not really you, that there is a Holy One of Israel. So, wow, I like I said, this is like a little bit mind-blowing for me to hear him. And then that it was already mind-blowing. And then he slipped in that milk and meat thing. That's Caleb, bad. I'm like,
that's bad.
I almost, if you would have just told me MacArthur said that, I would have not believed somebody unless I heard that recording. So,
all right.
Because that's the sloppy, if it's not a wackadoo scale, it's a sloppy scale.
It definitely a sloppy scale. All right. That's going to do it for us today. If you have videos that you want to have us review on Mystery Bible Theater 3000, please send them to chegg@torahresource.com, chegg@torahresource.com. If the video is more than 5 minutes, then please tell me the clip that you want from that timestamp. So 2-3 minutes in there, something like that. All right?
Don't leave us guessing.
Yeah, don't leave us guessing. We'll see you guys on the next one.